rights soldiers here across Illinois and Dupage County and throughout this great nation. You are the voice for the voiceless. You are the hope for those who are hopeless. You are part of a great and noble tradition. You are the heart and soul of the NAACP. You are the front lines of democracy and fairness in your communities. You are the men and women who hear the complaints of discrimination, who monitor the school boards, the city councils, the county councils. You are the ones that police the police, who register the voters, who educate the voters, and who are directly responsible for getting the voters to the polls. You are the ones that keep our organization moving. See, who else like you could spend restless nights, many long and dreary hours, in meetings after meetings, continuing to do the work of this great organization? See, you are the ones that sometimes find yourselves frustrated and bewildered by those you try to help, when they turn their backs on you and will not even purchase a membership in the NAACP. And then they go and complain that we're not doing enough, when most often they don't do anything. See, the comedian and activist Dick Gregory often points out that when black people need help first, they call on Jesus. Then second, they call on the NAACP. See, I'm talking to somebody tonight. See, you are the ones who frequently are misunderstood and too often ridiculed for addressing issues that are just and right in our nation. But you are the one that are tough enough to fight, yet tender enough to cry, human enough to make mistakes, humble enough to admit them, strong enough to absorb the pain, and resilient enough to bounce back and keep on moving. And for that, we're grateful. In 1909, in Springfield, Illinois, on this day, 102 years ago, our founders initiated something called the Call. And the call was to address the concerns of Northerners to find a way to create social equality. And I've been traveling. I haven't been home since Thursday of last week. And when I leave tomorrow, I'll be going back home. But I'm so glad to know that this is my final stop in this NAACP journey on today. That I'd be right here where our founders, less than miles away, created what I so dear true hold in my heart today, the NAACP. And something they call was the Call. And today I stopped by 102 years saying, Brother Mario, it is time for us to announce the call of the second century of the NAACP, because this is our time. See, we are experiencing a changing of the guards when the old warriors are passing on. They have kept their hands on the plow and they have held on. Now to my generation, it is said that to whom much is given, much is required. But I say to you this evening, you have been given more than you know, but not more than you deserve. So I issue this call to you this evening. I issue a call to lead. See, we live in the most exciting time in history. A time when man now walks where angels once were imagined. A time when science can clone life in a laboratory and bring men and women back to life on operating rooms. And we are only a Google away from an encyclopedic communication that it makes exponential development of knowledge that seems slow. I'm getting somewhere. A time when wars can be fought by computers and 18-year-olds can be billionaires. We live in a time where more mysterious than Harry Potter and more promising than the three-dimensional game, The Wii. What shall be done with the mind and body in the next 10 years will astound us as parents, but be laughable to our children. It is our time, and we're so honored to have leading our charge a dynamic staff and a dynamic leader of our chairman, Rawson Brock, and our president and CEO, Benjamin Todd Jealous. See, Dr. King declared, when the history books are written, in the future, somebody will have to say, there lived a race of a black people who had the moral courage to stand up for their rights, and thereby they injected a new meaning into the veins in their history and civilization. And yes, the NAACP has done just that. Ours is a great history not only of yesterday, but also of tomorrow, of today, but even better, one tomorrow. Today we remember those who are in the real way of our modern day heroes and heroines. They were those pioneers who carved out this title from nothing more than faith, hope, determination, and commitment to the betterment of our people. They, like so many of you in the room, are the unsung heroes and sheroes who sacrificed and struggled just so that we could be the strong, vigilant, and vibrant organization that we are today. We remember those who have answered the greatest call of labor to reward. But we also honor those who are amongst us today, those team members who have been on the NAACP front line for more than 40 and 50 years. We have members that went to jail, that lost their jobs. They were beaten and abused in an effort to win this race. Those who had to put aside the big me, the nobody but me, the only me, the me syndrome, the attitude aside and sacrifice the personal safety and integrity in order that we may be where we are today. Many of their names will never be written in the headlines. There are no plaques on the walls to honor their work. There are no buildings or streets that honor or remember their sacrifice. But yet they gave all blood, sweat, and tears for us to be here today. In those little hamlets, now bursting towns in the South, they signed petitions and dared to go down to the county courthouse and register to vote. They offered their children to integrate the public schools. See, we recognize and salute those who came before us and still continue to be by our side. To you, our elders, veterans of the movements, we are eternally grateful. We realize that your sacrifices and tenacity unselfishly is the struggle and the reason that we attend the finest schools today, that we live in some of the finest neighborhoods, that we can even eat at some of the finest restaurants and serve at all levels of government and in the judiciary. It is because of you that came to wait for us. Your work has not gone in vain, or your work has not been forgotten. Thank you for pioneering a path for us to follow, and yes, we're challenged and inspired by your presence here today. And I challenge you, those of us who have benefited the most from the work of the NAACP, and that's each and every one of you in here, I challenge you not to let those trials and those testimonies of those warriors in the struggle go in vain. We are eating from the crops that we did not plant, and we are drinking from wells that we sure did not dig. So we have all benefited so much. My grandmother would always tell me stories that most of us in here today cannot even fathom, a time when grandparents and parents were referred to as the unconventional N-word or coon or boy by people who are young enough to be their grandchildren. Most of us in this room have never experienced having to get off of the sidewalk because a white woman was approaching in the opposite direction, or having to eat from the back door at the restaurant, or because of the color of her skin, or ride at the back of the bus. See, most of us cannot imagine a time when we had to know the preamble to the Constitution, or know how many bubbles are in a bar of soap in order to register to vote. See, we aren't old enough, somebody, to have the experienced hands that these hundreds of others assaults that African Americans were confronted with as a part of their daily lives. See, some would say that we should forget about the past and live for the future. Some of you may even say that it couldn't have been that bad because so many of us survived today. They would say that we should forget the weary years and the silent tears. For those who ask if the NAACP is outdated and still needed, or why the NAACP are you still fighting, and we say we are still fighting because we heed the call of those who came before us, and to place our mark on history, dedicated to a better life for our children and our children's children, and for all of those who will come after us, all of those names that we will never know, or faces that we will never see. For our time will have long passed. We're still fighting for what Grandmama used to talk about in her prayers when she prayed for her children and her children's children yet unborn. See, somebody prayed for us. See, truth be told, we are all here today because somebody grabbed us by the arm and pulled us from out of our situation. See, young people, we need a voice. See, Martin inspired my grandmother's generation with I Have a Dream. James Brown told my mother's generation to say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. And Jesse told them that I am somebody. And yes, Barack has issued the call for change. But our children are listening and waiting for that voice of their generation. Yes. So today, you like me are loyal stewards of a great legacy. It is our obligation to hold high the bloodstained banner. And it held high, we must hold it until we die. This means that sometimes we must go against the prevailing wind. see, Julian Brown, see, entrusted in your care through the NAACP are the dreams of our slave forefathers of a life brimming with possibility. See, Mr. Frank Jarrett, see, entrusted in your care through the NAACP is the future of the current generation, which is clouded by fear and in too many instances mirrored of the quicksands of hopelessness. And entrusted in your care, Mr. James Fitzpatrick, is through the NAACP are the hopes and aspirations of a generation yet born. See, what I tell people is that education is the civil rights issue of our generation. I believe that the personal investment of education is a return on the public investment of education. When you begin to invest personally, you get your return publicly. That means that people aren't going to jail. That means that people are getting a job. That's the investment of a personal education. So thank you for making that commitment. To my dear sister Yvette Rogers, I stopped by to tell you that it's your time when we spend billions of dollars on smart bombs, but comparatively nothing to develop smart children. See, I stopped by Brother Andy Williams Jr. to tell you that it's your time when the national economy has gone from robust to bust, unemployment, recession, layoffs, plant closing, restructurings, downsizing, outsourcing, define our national economy. But I stopped by my sister Wanda Parker this evening to let you know that it's your time when 1/5 of all American children go to bed in poverty every night in the richest nation in the world. But I stopped by to this Freedom Fund Gala chair, Miss Ivory, to let you know that it's your time when 1/2 of all African American children are growing up amidst broken sidewalks, broken families, broken cities, and broken dreams. But I stopped by Sister Cynthia to let you know, if you hadn't know, that it's your time when 1/2 of all public schools, public housing built in the nation during the last decade were jails. But I stopped by Sister Peyton, wherever you are this evening. I know you're in here. I stopped by to let you know that quality public schools are being exchanged for vouchers and charter schools. But I stopped by to my sister Jackie Mayo to let you know that it's your time when schoolyards are becoming social hunting grounds for prisons instead of recruiting grounds for colleges. I stopped by LaToya Forrester to let you know when the top 20% wealthiest Americans are owned as much as the bottom 95%, the greatest inequality since the 1920s. But Valerie, tell me, I stopped by to tell you that when the proportion of poor children in America is higher than any other developed nation, but we as a nation would rather develop missiles than develop minds. So as we go back into our respective communities, wherever that may be, the good part of town, the so-so good part of town, or the town where you don't see other people that you don't want to see, I want you to remember that when you go back, that I want you to go back with the spirit of a William Alexander, with the vision of a Nathaniel Odom, with the calculation of a Ollie Matthews, with the passion of a Claude Otley, with the inner motivation of a Frank Jarrett, with the determination of a Charlie Thurston, with the courage of a Lewis Garland. Because when future generations peer through the scope of technology, telescope of history, let them say we did not waver, we did not flinch, we did not shrink on our responsibility to face the issues head on during our time of new challenges and hope. A strong people we are. We are the descendants of African kings and queens who helped to build great civilizations. We built the pyramids, invented geometry. We were the great minds in science and math, and laid the blueprint for our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. But sometimes if you go through this process and you forget where you come from, I stop by to remind you that you come from a people that sing like a Mariam Anderson, Aretha Franklin, and a Fantasia, that dance like a James Brown, Chris Brown, Michael Jackson, and Usher, that run like a Jesse Owens and a Carl Lewis, that make folks laugh like a Richard Pryor and a Mark Lawrence, that write like a James Baldwin, a Maya Angelou, and a Michael Eric Dyson, that play the piano like a Ray Charles and Alicia Keys, that direct like a Spike Lee and a Tyler Perry, that can shoot like a Wilt Chamberlain and an Allen Iverson, that can hit like a Hank Aaron and a Barry Bonds, that can box like a Joe Louis, Muhammad Ali, and a Evander Holyfield, that can act like a Sidney Poitier and a Denzel Washington, that can think like a W.E.B. Du Bois and a Cornel West, that can lead like a Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Barack Obama, but most importantly serve like a man named Jesus. I stopped by to remind you of the day when we must remind our supporters that while the woods may be lonely, dark, and deep, the promise is to keep in miles before we can sleep. beaches of Miami to the benches of Central Park, New York, from the deserts of the Midwest to the Great Lakes of Michigan, from sea to shining sea, from Hollywood, Florida to Hollywood, California, from the campus of Yale, Harvard, Princeton, Morehouse, DuPage, University of Illinois, Bethune-Cookman, FAMU, North Carolina, A&T. We are the nation's largest basketball, most fearless, most tough and discussed, for most loved and most hated civil rights organization. Somebody, we are the NAACP. And as I close out this evening, somebody ought to just pause for a moment and say, thank you, NAACP, for being my bridge over troubled water. See, thank you because even before we were the twinkle in our parents' eyes, many laid their bodies down to build a bridge for us to cross over. And they didn't have degrees. They didn't speak the King's English. But they recognized and they believed in